which is one of the biggest downsides with a socialistic system. A human being performs best in a death ground situation. I have previously done videos about working 9 to 5 and my personal experience with that lifestyle. But today we're talking specifically why many people remain poor. And the answer might be quite obvious, but it's kinda complicated. Let's see what TED can teach us.
Imagine that you've been unemployed and seeking work for months. Government benefit programs have helped you cover rent, utilities, and food, but you're barely getting by. Finally, you hear back about a job application. You receive your first paycheck in months, and things seem to be turning around, but there's a catch. Your new job pays just enough to disqualify you from the benefit programs, and not enough to cover the same costs. To make things worse, you have to pay for transportation to work and childcare while you're at the office. Somehow, you have less money now than when you were unemployed. Economists call this demoralizing situation the welfare trap.
The infamous rat race. The whole point of being employed and working for somebody else is to go by. It's not about having a great life where you can afford a lot of stuff, have your vacation, have your latest versions of technological gadgets, and still being able to save some bucks. The rat race is about you doing the same thing, and while you progress, while you upgrade and climb up that hierarchy, the same thing happens with your cost of living. We're never satisfied with wherever we are. Human psychology or human desire is insatiable. We always strive for something better, and that's the principle with evolution. The trick here is to understand why you're striving for certain goals and trying to find balance and peace with where you are while simultaneously trying to reach your materialistic goals. I've talked about this stuff with other people as well. Yet again, my intention is not to crap on the whole 9 to 5 thing. My intention is for you to be honest with yourself about your goals and where you're headed in your life. When you ask someone about their living situation, about their professional career, and they say, it's okay, then you know they're bullshitting, first of all, themselves. And secondly, that's not the type of lie that you can be naive about and ignore like a bad whiff. It's the person telling you how they feel about their living situation. When they blurt out that reply, right then and there, you know they're full of crap. The issue with money is very complicated, and I'll come back to that later on.
One of the many different poverty traps affecting millions of people around the world. Poverty traps are economic and environmental circumstances that reinforce themselves, perpetuating poverty for generations. Some poverty traps are tied to an individual's circumstances, like a lack of access to healthy food or education. Others can affect entire nations, such as cycles of corrupt government or climate change. But the cruel irony of welfare traps in particular is that they stem from the very policies designed to battle poverty.
This is the biggest issue with libertarianism, which we will discuss later on. But the thing is, when you're accustomed of taking care of yourself, having responsibility over your own life and sitting behind the driving wheel, it falls naturally for you that you have to do your own shit. And the moment that you get some kind of ambition to achieve a certain goal, you go for it. If you lack knowledge, experience, you go get them. You search for resources, you search for competence, mentorship, and you seek out the best of the best within that area who can help you to navigate in your journey. But the truth of the matter is that majority is lacking that self-reliance. They need guidance. They need someone to hold their hands and show them the way and feed them with the spoon and stroke their hair and tell them that everything will be all right, that life will be okay. And for that reason, we need governments. We need the big brother who can sweep in and pour some breadcrumbs for the majority to get by. This is why most of the people live from paycheck to paycheck. They have the need of relaxing, having a couple of beers, getting together with their friends, not accomplishing any bigger goals, not having ambitions. And that's okay. But then you cannot complain about life being tough, that you have to crawl to the finish line at the end of every month. I read a thread about a guy complaining how it's difficult to go by making 3,000 euros or dollars, that after paying the rent, other small costs, the food, he's barely having enough money to get a car. And as for saving for your own place, out of the question. There are two mindsets, surviving and thriving. If you have the first one, you will never have the feeling of satisfaction. You have to be vigilant and decisive with your own life situation.
Most societies throughout history employed some strategies to help people in poverty meet basic needs. Before the 20th century, religious groups and private charities often led such initiatives. Today, these are called welfare programs, and they usually take the form of government-provided subsidies for housing, food, energy, and healthcare. Typically, these programs are means-tested, meaning that only people who fall below a certain income level are eligible for benefits. This policy is designed to ensure aid goes to those who need it most, but it also means people lose access as soon as they earn more than the qualification threshold, regardless of whether or not they're financially stable enough to stay there.
Governmental subsidies are breadcrumbs, peanuts. A very self-reliant and self-respecting person won't ever be able to go by with the kind of chump change that government gives you. It's the bare minimum, it's the crackers and butter. It's very tough to be at the bottom of the society. But yet again, most of the people are having the consequences of their actions. The reason why you are where you are is because of the options that you chose before. Although you have to understand, your yesterday doesn't have to define your tomorrow. Even though it will be very hard, very difficult to go against the stream, to raise yourself again, to dust yourself off and move on with your life towards the betterment is the only choice that you have. And it's up to you whether you want to have that burden or not. Do you want to suffer slowly, or do you want to feel hurt today so that tomorrow becomes lighter?
This vicious cycle is harmful to both those in poverty and those outside of it. Mainstream economic models assume people are rational actors who weigh the cost and benefits of their options and choose the most advantageous path forward. If those in poverty know they'll gain no net benefit from working, they're incentivized to remain on government assistance. Of course, people work for many reasons, including societal norms and personal values. But income is a major incentive to pursuing employment, and when less people take on new jobs, the economy slows down.
It's funny how we always think that the way that I feel, the way that I live my life is some kind of a norm. This is why we become shocked when people come forward and ask you stupid questions that would be very obvious to you. Like asking you for directions for a certain street when they clearly have the latest smartphone, more flashy than yours. You become baffled. It's like, why did you pay for that gadget if you don't know how to use it? But the reality is many people are like that. They don't have any idea how much money they have on their credit card or how to use their latest smartphone. And yet again, this is why we need government to hold their hands, to show them the way, even though the way won't benefit them to 100%. Guidance costs a lot. If you're sitting on a passenger seat, do not expect to arrive at the destination that you desire.
Keeping people in poverty and potentially pushing people on the cusp of poverty over the edge. Some have suggested this feedback loop could be removed by eliminating government assistance programs altogether. But most agree this solution is neither realistic nor humane. So how can we redesign benefits in a way that doesn't penalize people for working?
This is what I was talking about, how libertarianism doesn't work for all people. It most often than not benefits those who are self-reliant and self-sufficient. So the dilemma arises between socialism and libertarianism. If you pull the rug under the feet of a person, it will in some cases push them towards becoming more proficient in the game of survival. But for many others, that will be detrimental for their existence. This is why she's talking about the issue of being humane. Do you want to raise tough people who can make it out regardless of the circumstances, but we will be very few? Or do you want to be humane so that many people in society remain as a burden?
Many countries have tried different ways to circumvent this problem. Some allow people to continue receiving benefits for a given period after finding a job, while others phase out benefits gradually as income increases. These policies still remove some financial incentive to work, but the risk of a welfare trap is lower. Other governments provide benefits like education, childcare, or medical care, equally across all their citizens.
There's a thin line between taking own responsibility and accountability over your own life whilst having a governmental help, or going over to the dark side and abusing the system, making out different excuses and building up many cases where you play the victim card so that you can get several more breadcrumbs, which is one of the biggest downsides with a socialistic system. A human being performs best in a death ground situation, which can be translated to eat or be eaten, make it out or be gone forever.
One proposed solution takes this idea of universal benefits even further. A universal basic income would provide a fixed benefit to all members of society, regardless of wealth or employment status. This is the only known policy that could entirely remove welfare traps, since any earned wages would supplement the benefit rather than replace it. In fact, by creating a stable income floor below which no one can fall, basic income might prevent people from falling into poverty in the first place. Numerous economists and thinkers have championed this idea since the 18th century. But for now, universal basic income remains largely hypothetical.
If I remember correctly, I've got this question about the universal income earlier under a video I did previously, and what is my opinion about the subject. So here it goes. The universal income sounds very enticing, and if you are very optimistic and open-minded, you would think that it would solve a lot of problems that we have in society. But for that to happen, a society has to have a certain level of maturity. It's like an example that I have made before. It's like trying to reform a total democracy in China, which won't happen. For that, a certain level of maturity has to happen. Think about the time that you were a child. Your mental maturity today is not the same as it was then. It takes time, it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of reflection to do. For universal basic income to work, people have to leave their primal nature behind them, which is a difficult task to accomplish. The principle of the universal basic income have been tried out in countries with high living standards, like Finland. Those people are highly developed, and their mentality has come to a place when they can fathom the benefits with the universal basic income and why they shouldn't abuse such a system. Now, they haven't implemented in the whole country, but those places have the resources, both financial and knowledge-wise, in order to test out such concepts.
Although it's been tried in some places on a limited scale, these local experiments don't tell us much about how the policy would play out across an entire nation or a planet. Whatever strategy governments pursue, solving the welfare trap requires respecting people's agency and autonomy. Only by empowering individuals to create long-term change in their lives and communities can we begin to break the cycle of poverty.
I.e., the society has to become mentally mature. The same goes for 6-hour work week. The countries in Scandinavia are having that question on the agenda, bickering back and forth, trying to discuss and come up with a strategy to implement such reform, at least on a local scale. Nevertheless, that would be a step forward. The problem, the biggest issue with the poverty, remaining poor, is a mental thing. The only blockage happens in your mind. The biggest difference between us and those who have a lot of riches are only the mindset, especially now when all people in the world have the opportunity to make some serious dough with a flip of their fingers. Easier said than done, I know. Life isn't supposed to be easy. If you haven't watched the video about working 9 to 5, here's the link. I talk about my own experience and why I think it's a bad idea for people who think outside of the box. What's your biggest issue with money? Tell me in the commentary section. But for now, Hossein, out.